Hello, and welcome back to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and today I am honored to welcome Dr. Meaney to the podcast. A few months ago, Dr. Joseph Meaney from the National Catholic Bioethics Center joined us to discuss the Catholic Church's ethical guidelines for dealing with infertility, as well as to share his family's personal experience with infertility. On today's episode, Dr. Joseph's wife, Dr. Marie, joins us to share her perspective on their story, as well as to discuss the relational impact of infertility, both on marriages and on one's relationship with God. Dr. Marie shares the role of faith in her story, as well as the particular spiritual challenges that can come with struggling with infertility. We also discuss how this can affect men and women separately, and the tensions that this can place on the marriage relationship. And obviously, Dr. Marie offers some advice on how to resolve this. Towards the end of the episode, she also offers advice for friends and family about how you can support couples in your life who may be struggling with infertility, as well as what to say and what not to say. I really enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Marie and found it very spiritually enriching, and I hope that you enjoy it as well. I also hope that both episodes together, both Dr. Joseph's and Dr. Marie's, can offer a little bit more of a comprehensive look at this struggle that's so common in today's world, and also offer some just helpful advice on what to do if this is something that you and your spouse are struggling with, or if you know people in your life who may be carrying this cross. As always, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this episode on social media so it can reach someone who needs to hear it. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Marie to Living a Culture of Life. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Marie.
Thank you so much, Colleen. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. We interviewed your husband about this issue on talking about infertility a few months ago, and it's wonderful to have your side of the story. He talked more about the ethical ways to treat infertility, and I think this one will be focused a little bit more on the spiritual relationship side of it. So,
Sure.
yeah. Well, before we begin, could you just tell our audience a little bit about who you are and, what you do?
Sure. So I am an independent academic. We do have one daughter who is now 16 years old, and I take care of her. And I have a background in philosophy and comparative literature. I have a doctorate from the University of Oxford. I'm a specialist on the French philosopher and mystic Simone Weil. And we've now been living for 7 years in the Philadelphia area.
That's wonderful. And could you share with our audience a little bit about what your personal journey with infertility was? I know that Dr. Joseph shared his side of it, but I know that it can affect men and women differently, and so hearing your own version of it is great.
Sure, sure. I mean, I think the problem often is, and I think that's changing a bit now, but that you have no idea that that might be an issue when you get married. You're preparing for marriage, you're thinking about children and spacing, and you want to be open and have lots of kids and kind of set yourself of how that's going to change everything, but you're just not expecting it not to happen.
Mhm.
And so, we got married. We never lived in the same country while we were dating. And so we started our marriage in Italy, where my husband was working for Human Life International, and I was finishing my doctorate in Oxford. And yeah, and babies just didn't come. And you're trying to tell yourself, "Oh, it's okay, they'll come," and people were reassuring. And I didn't go as quickly as I should have to seek medical advice because I was just thinking, I don't want to get stressed about it, and it's going to happen anyway. So anyway, and then, year after year, we had no children, and some doctors told us, "Yeah, you should it should be possible." Others were a little bit less encouraging, and we then moved back to Virginia, and we're in a very Catholic, wonderful place, as you know, Front Royal, with a lots of large families. And so all these people were having these kids, and here I was without a child, and, the connecting point was missing. People are very busy with their kids, and you just can't engage in the same way, and it's just what surprised me about this was how utterly heartbreaking it was. I had, obviously known people who suffered from infertility, and I thought it was hard, but I thought, well, once you have a spouse, that's already so great. That sort of should console you with a lot of things, and of course it does. It's amazing to be married. But, um but I think nothing prepares you now. Not everybody experiences infertility in the same way. I mean, I was distinguish between three different categories. So there are those who are fine with it. They don't really mind. They don't particularly want children. And, that's just what it is. For others, it's hard, but, they manage to deal with it. And then there are others who, for whom it's absolutely life changing and crushing. And I was one of those, unfortunately. And yeah, so the years went by, and you could see how people around us were not thinking anymore what was going to happen, which was hard to swallow. And and then the miracle happened that we conceived, and it was sort of the different things that happened. I can talk about it now. I can talk about it later. But basically, there were some sisters of charity, missionaries of charity of Mother Teresa, who saw my mom at church. My parents, I was raised in Germany. And so every summer I would come and they would see, still no kids. And they said, well, why don't you take this relic of Mother Teresa and give it to him? Pray, she should pray to her every day. And I didn't pray every day, but I prayed now and then, and that was in the summer. And by January, we had conceived, and our daughter then was due on October 1st, which is, of course, the Feast day of Sainte Thérèse of Lisieux. And so she truly was a miracle baby. And of course, we hoped that more would happen, and we'd have now suddenly the spell was broken, and we would have more kids. And we did have a miscarriage 2 years later, which was really heart wrenching again. And then I hoped for a very long time. We hoped for a very long time that something would still happen, but you know, then that window closes, and we're very grateful to have our daughter.
Yeah. No, it's how beautiful that you were able to have one child in there, but also that has to be so hard to, especially being involved in the pro-life ministry, the beauty of children, the beauty of large families, and just to desire that and to feel like other people around you are having that happen. And that has to be such a hard cross to carry in some ways.
Yeah, yeah. And you think you're doing something wrong. That's the way I always felt. I feel like perhaps people were saying, well, perhaps you're too stressed, and you should let go. And so I was like trying to unstress and not be upset about it, and it's completely counterproductive, of course, ultimately. Yeah.
Now, this is a parallel thing, but I know that people who want to get married and haven't been able to find a spouse, oftentimes people say, oh, when you stop worrying about it, when you stop thinking about it, that's when it will happen. Is there a parallel experience if you're struggling with infertility where people say, just let it go, stop worrying about it, and babies will come?
Well, many people were telling me the story of others who'd adopted a child and who then conceived.
Mhm.
Now we did not feel the call to adopt. I think it's a call in and of itself, and it's often also given as a kind of advice of, this will cure your infertility, which it doesn't do. I mean, it's wonderful, and one loves one's adopted children just as much as one's biological ones, but it's not a cure. And we simply didn't feel called to it. And no, with me there was no change. It's just by the grace of God, and many different medical approaches that we tried. We just threw everything we had at it, and I don't know which one ultimately really, you know, what we're trying to get to the tipping point. We're like, there's probably so many issues involved. I mean, if it's not just one spouse, it can be two spouses, and
Mhm.
then you try, alternative medicine, normal medicine, and then you look at the psychological components, and you look at the spiritual components, and so at some point something just gave way, and God gave us that great gift.
Yeah, and there's also just so much unknowns about infertility. There's so much more research these days, but it also just seems to be one of those issues that there's a great deal of mystery around it. Unfortunately, I think because industries like the IVF industry just have such a stranglehold on like what quote fertility treatment is that there just hasn't been as much research in that area.
I know. I mean, I heard a talk by Dr. Hilgers, who developed the Creighton method and his Pope Paul VI Institute, and has done tremendous work in helping people suffering from infertility. And I was at a talk of his in Rome. That must have been about, whatever, 17, 18 years ago. And he was saying that basically all the research was going into IVF and not just the normal cure of people, because even people who go for IVF, normally if you'd ask them, well, would you like to be cured from your infertility and have children the natural way, or do you want to go through the harrowing process of IVF? I think they'd all say, no, we'd much rather have children the natural way. But IVF sort of goes around that and just tries to produce a baby for you and then implant it and hope it sticks. And of course, the real goal should be to cure the spouses so that they can have children on their own. And he said that really because of that, not much progress had been made since the
Mhm.
50s, the 60s, which is just mind blowing. I mean, so there's Dr. Hildreth, obviously, who did decades-long research. And then there is the at Duquesne University, Dr. Margaret Duane with her FACTS thing. They also look at reproductive restorative medicine and are looking at it in a broader way than just Creighton and napper technology. And I think that's so promising. And I'm just so glad that they're doing all this work.
Yeah, no, I'm so thankful that there seems to be just more of an awareness of women's health in general. You both with birth control was often the band-aid fix for issues for a long time, and now there seems to be more awareness of PCOS and endometriosis and the fact that birth control just puts a band-aid over that and doesn't fix the underlying problem. And then on the flip side, those often feed into people struggling with infertility. And so it was kind of this train of if you had issues, you were given birth control, and then once you couldn't conceive after you went off birth control, you were given IVF. And there was nothing ever done about the underlying issues, and it feels like there's a lot more awareness about that now, which
And then,
is
of
amazing.
course, what doctors always say, I mean, the best way to avoid infertility is to marry young. You can't
Mhm.
control that, but
Yeah.
some people purposefully wait with their children, with having children, because they want to have the career first. And however much I can sympathize with that and understand it, if you've done a lot of studies and you want to have your place in the world and you want to do it, but just be aware that, once you hit your 30s, it's going to get harder and harder. And of course, there are people suffering from infertility who get married young and, tragically are
Mhm.
not able to have children. So it's not a guarantee, but there is really something about, the 30 and then 35. And I got married at 30, which, I'm sure didn't help. But it's just, yeah, some people's choices today are just going in one direction, and they think technology will make it possible for them to put in place their life plan whenever they're ready. At 40 now, I want my child, and perhaps they have frozen embryos or ovula because they think that's what. But even then, it's not sure that you will actually have a child because these things don't necessarily work. Apart from the fact that it's a terrible thing to do to children
Yeah.
and to yourself.
Yeah, there's all the ethical issues and then also just very practical ones. So, um, what role did your Catholic faith play in your journey with infertility? How did that kind of help inform it? Did it offer comfort, or did it ever feel like just restrictive because IVF wasn't an option?
It never felt restrictive. We were very lucky that way. Both my husband and I were on the same page, and IVF was never an issue. I can completely understand the temptation that couples
Mhm.
feel, and if I've gotten for my research, I've gone on these websites of IVF clinics, and boy, do they make it attractive. I mean, you can just feel the pull, the way they speak to your pain and try to dress them so this is your chance to have a child. And but we were really lucky. God protected us, and our faith was absolutely key in making it through this trial.
Mhm.
But at the same time, as I said, it was just astounding to me how painful it was. And I thought, well, we read the documents of the church, and they were all very good. But I felt, well, where's the spiritual help here? How can we bear this from day to day? And that's one of the reasons why I wrote my first version of my book in 2006, which came out with Human Life International. So that was still 3 years before our daughter was born, and just to address that and show, well, how can one deal with that in the everyday, and how can I navigate friends and family who want to be helpful and who often say the wrong thing and make it worse. And so you're just so hurt, your heart is breaking anyway, and then on top of that, you're being hurt by other people who are not intending to do it, of course. But yeah, so I mean, God was good and led us through it, but it felt like, um, if we never have children, will I ever get out of this tunnel of darkness, interiorly? And it was good speaking to older women who'd been through it and to see that you could.
Mhm.
Everybody's everyone's journey is different, and, for some, they sort of can accept it much faster, and others perhaps struggle with it for the rest of their lives. I think it's very, very uneven, but, I definitely felt a lot of healing from God, because even after our daughter was born, I was surprised by the intensity of my longing for more children. I mean, all I
Mhm.
wanted is to go back into that hospital and have more kids, and so it was still heart-wrenching. I mean, we had our baby, so we can't compare to those poor couples who don't, and we're extremely grateful. But, I can feel, I can empathize with different stages of the process.
Yeah, and also that's actually kind of beautiful in your role of having written this book to be able to both empathize with people who are struggling with infertility at first, having so many years before having a child, and then also empathizing with people that struggle with secondary infertility. You can relate to both sides of it in a very
Yeah.
personal way. And
Mhm.
it seems like that's just beautiful given your ministry writing these books for women. What are some examples of particular spiritual challenges that come when you're dealing
Uh-huh.
with infertility?
Well, I mean, I think for me, certainly one key issue was not understanding that I needed to mourn this. I thought it was all about being heroic and strong and accepting God's will. And I didn't realize that by not mourning it, I was struggling with God. I was not really accepting it. I was not able to accept it. And however much I tried with my will and my mind to do it. And I think I saw that with a lot of other women too. You know, if you're a faithful Catholic and you take your faith seriously, you know what you want to do the right way. You want to say that God is sending you this, so you want to do the right thing, and ultimately you're doing exactly the wrong thing. And that was another reason why I wrote that book because like I don't want any other women to make the same silly mistakes I did. Um, so once I realized that, no, this was something that deserved to be mourned, even if it was perhaps poo-pooed or not taken seriously by other people, and that that was allowing me to bring that pain to the Father, to God the Father, and receive some consolation. And not that the healing was immediate or any like, oh, that there was immediate relief. And what was also a key moment for me was to realize I was thought, well, I just have to accept it that this might be the case for the rest of my life. And I stupidly thought, well, that means I need to accept the next 50 years in this state. And God doesn't give you the grace for the next 50 years now. He gives you the grace for today. And suddenly it became much more manageable. I mean, we've heard these things, you only need to accept it for now, etcetera, but really actually doing it was a new step, and to say, "Okay, I don't you need to accept it for this day," because really deep down, I couldn't accept it. I didn't want this infertility. I desperately wanted to have children. I couldn't pretend I didn't want it. But I could say, "Well, for today or for this minute, I can accept it, but my hope is that in a month, in a year, I will have children." So that was really a big, big turning point. Um, the other thing that I found was sort of divine mind reading, of thinking, you're trying to understand, what is God trying to do? He's trying to teach me something here. So perhaps if I understand it quickly, it's going to happen, or is it because, I think particularly women, that was my case, but particularly women perhaps who've had abortions or who have caught sexually transmitted diseases or have been on contraception, and, all of that can affect your fertility, and to have to deal with that guilt and say, I might well be responsible in part for this is I think must be is a terrible burden. And even those who haven't done it, is kind of the feeling, perhaps, God needs to just break through my sinfulness this way. And I found, well, if you look at the book of Job, God doesn't the friends of Job have lots of ideas of why he's going through this, but God doesn't answer that way. He basically tells Job, "I'm so much greater. How do you think you can understand that?" So I think we will understand, we will get the big picture later, but while we're in it, I think it's a little bit futile, and means one could have a wrong picture, wrong image of God, and it's not helpful.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's interesting. It also is going back to what you were saying about mourning. It makes sense that when you lose someone from your life, we all
Mhm,
understand that you need to mourn that. And I don't
mhm,
think that people really put themselves in the shoes of, oh, you're mourning something that didn't happen and that's good and that's okay. And it's because it's a good that
mhm,
mourning is so
mhm,
necessary and being
mhm.
able to bring that to the cross.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and it's been compared, I mean, suffering from infertility has been compared to losing a child, which is, of
Mm.
course, really, really heartbreaking. It's just a child you've never had, and I think that that rings true with a lot of women. And I remember when I gave my mom my first version of this, she said precisely that, "Wow, that's like losing a child." And I thought, well, it was nice that she got it, that she understood how hard this was.
Was there ever a sense that you felt that you were failing as a Catholic couple by not being able to have children, especially if you're surrounded by all these couples that are welcoming so many children and you know that there's like that's what we're called to do, be fertile and multiply. Was there like was that a struggle that you had to wrestle with?
Yeah, I mean, sure, and, I mean, on a whole number of levels. I mean, first of all, some people assumed we intentionally weren't having children,
Mhm.
and were either calling us out on it, or you could kind of see the implication, but it was hard to address if they weren't coming out with it. So, that was difficult, and then, you always praise so much the generosity of couples that have so many kids, and they're rightly praised. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and it comes with a lot of sacrifices, so I don't wanna poo-poo that, but you're like, "I wanna be that heroic. I wanna be doing this." But I'm just not given the opportunity, and so it feels like a very silent suffering, and especially since the general mentality is, no kids means greater freedom. You can think more of your pleasures and your desires and fulfill them, and, and that wasn't the case at all. All we were doing was just suffering that we didn't have kids. So, yeah, and of course, again, you struggle then, why God is allowing this. And as you said, my husband working in the pro-life movement, why, when you're trying to defend life and so many other children are trying to get rid of their kids, and then you'll be there welcoming them and they're just not coming. So no, it's definitely very hard.
Yeah, especially like Front Royal, I feel like would be a very hard community to be struggling with infertility in, just because there are so many children, there's so many constant reminders of that. And then again, the pro-life movement of like you're watching women get abortions and it's like, no, I want that. Like why are these women who don't want children being given children that they're gonna kill and I'm not being granted that? There's just so much compounding, like it's just compounding the cross so much more.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were a few women also in Front Royal who were going through something similar.
Mhm.
And so that was helpful to be supporting each other. Yeah, not to be
Did you
completely
find, like, support among other Catholics in a way that was helpful? Like, either at the parish, maybe not Front Royal Parish, but just in general, when you were going through this, did you find support within the church? And, yeah, like, were your spiritual needs and your emotional needs ministered to? And
Mhm,
if not, what can churches do better to help women in that
mhm.
situation?
I think at the time there was a huge lack of awareness. So, I that was precisely our problem, that I felt we couldn't find help. And when we sought help, we were given the wrong kind of advice. Again, not really seeing how difficult this was. And so, but I find that now, since then, so many things have happened and there's so much more awareness. I mean, there's that group Springs in the Desert that helps women online and through prayer, and they support each other. It's just beautiful, their ministry. And at parish level, so much more is happening. And when we were traveling in France a few years ago, we met a priest who organizes retreats for couples going through this. And there's just yeah, just now I find if I talk to priests or to religious about it, there is they know much more. They've been much more prepared for this. I think more could be done, and I think it definitely should be part of marriage preparation, so that couples know that this might be an issue they run into. But at the time, I think there was just a lot of ignorance, and yeah, but people were praying for us, and
Mhm.
that was very helpful, and God was carrying us. So
It was interesting. I was talking to a woman who she and her husband had dealt with infertility, and she said that she never heard of napro technology. She went to the priest and he'd never heard of it, and it wasn't until a friend mentioned it to her that she even heard of it in the first place. And it's such a clear area that this is something that
yeah.
priests and people within the parish should know about so that they
Yeah,
can offer, like, just point people in that direction if they haven't heard of it.
yeah, because now it seems so much more known. I mean, when I talk about it now, people are like, "Oh, come on, we know about it." That's nothing new to us, so I feel like, "Okay."
That's good.
A lot of the word has spread, so, yeah, but, yeah, there's always more to be done, of course, yeah.
Were there any particular stories of saints or other individuals that really offered consolation in your journey?
Yes, so, it was actually I mean, Mother Teresa came late because she was then tied to the birth of our daughter, but when these sisters with these nuns said that, and I started reading up a little bit more on her. And, I think it's called, James Langford's book on her, I forget the title, which is, really magnificent, and, her spirituality I thought was just amazing because she spoke about the fact that so often we do not let God into our really, really dark and painful places. So, when she speaks about the inner Calcutta, so not just that in the West we have our own Calcuttas and that people are just dying from lack of love and are in such spiritual despair. But each one of us has these places where it's just too painful. Either it feels too sinful or it's too painful or both that you feel like nobody can go in there, even God can't. And to realize that really only God can go in there and that it's really hard for a human being to be able to reach that. Even your spouse might not be able to reach that. And so um, to know that it also took, you know, we always have this, I think, a little bit of fear of God in the wrong way. There's the right fear of God, but there's a wrong way that comes from the fall. And that God is sort of in order to do what is good for us is just hurting us and keeping this going and not completely trusting him, but to realize, no, he's the only one who can heal this pain. So that was very, very helpful. And then, this was actually when I was dealing with secondary infertility and a miscarriage pain while we were living the second time in Italy, close to Rome. We heard about this woman, Chiara Corbella, and I remember my social media at the time kind of exploded because she died, and I didn't know her, I hadn't heard anything about, and then there was her funeral, and then there came this book out on her, and then we went even to Assisi to a day-long retreat organized by her husband and her spiritual director, and her story is so incredible. So she died in 2012, beautiful young woman, not even 30 years old, and, she had 2 children, and for at first, and each time the child died after a few hours, and they knew each time. Suddenly, the doctor saw that something was wrong, and of course, some were putting pressure on them to have an abortion, which they didn't do. And so they, they left the child for the few hours they had. I think once it was a boy and once a girl, had them baptized, and were just, you would think, devastated, but extremely carried by God in this. And then they wanted children so desperately. And the doctor said, well, the two handicaps that the children had nothing to do with each other. There was really nothing wrong with them. So they tried again. And, everything was fine with this child, but this time she started having problems, and they realized that she had a cancer in her throat that normally only generally men over 70 who smoked all their lives get, and she never smoked, and she wasn't even 30. And again, she put the child first, and then she brought it almost to term. They did a C-section at 8 months, and then she got treatment, but, after 14 months, she died. And her journey was so incredible because she was full of trust to God, and her husband, the day before she died, asked her, Christ said that this cross is light. Do you find it light? And she said, oh, the cross is sweet. And really incredible. And their thing was of her, so Chiara and her husband's approach was piccoli passi. You have to make small steps, just one little step at a time, and then God does tremendous things. So that was very inspiring to see the heroic nature of that woman, and also to see how God gave her that gift of joy in it,
Mhm.
which He doesn't necessarily do, and that's His prerogative. So you're not doing anything wrong if you're suffering and you don't experience that joy. Some are more called to a dark night of the soul. But anyway, I just found it very inspiring.
Well, kind of as a counter to that, do you have any advice for people who are struggling with infertility, who are struggling with anger, either anger at God or anger at the church for restricting something like IVF, and just like wanting to remain faithful to God, faithful to his teachings, but really struggling with that emotion? How can they work through it? What are some tips that you have?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can understand that. Um, I mean, first of all, to work your way, through the anger regarding, um, the restrictions, it might be good just to read some of the documents and try to understand why the church is saying what it's saying. It's not saying it because it wants to make life difficult for you, because it wants to impose terrible burdens, but because it wants to teach you the language of love, and IVF is not the language of love, and just to understand um, how it turns the child into a commodity, and even if you're desperate for a child, which I completely get, um, it's not right to sin against the child you want to have. So I would say, the incredible thing is that in a way, and that might seem too idealistic, but I'm still going to say it, in a way, you are already able to make decisions as a parent without having children in terms of, I'm only going to choose what is good for my child. And, read things like the study My Daddy's Name is Donor. that was put together, whatever, 15 years ago, which compared children who had been born through IVF, who'd been adopted, and those that, just with the normal route. And the differences that there were between those that were IVF produced and those with adoption, where you think, well, that could be kind of similar, that told you something on an empirical level, that something was really, really wrong here. And reading the witnesses of people who are now adults and who've been conceived through IVF and their pain. There's one woman who said, my mother didn't want to carry that cross of infertility, and therefore she gave it to me. And, the cross of infertility is tragic. It's a human tragedy. Nobody's sinning against you. It just happens. But what you're doing to your child is in a way much, much worse, because by objectifying the child, this is a sin against love that you're committing. And some children manifest that, some don't, but some later you feel like something is wrong because they've been hurt. Now, of course, we're all hurt, and because we're living in a fallen world, so of course we're hurt a lot. But there's something when there's an act which is intrinsically wrong that makes it such a serious thing. So I'd suggest that, but just regarding generally the anger, I think express it to God. He wants to hear it. He really needs to hear it because that's what's in your heart, and he wants you to be authentic. He wants to know what you're feeling, and to you pretending that you're not angry isn't fooling anybody, and it's not allowing God to help you in your anger. Whilst, you need to cry out to God like Job did. You need to cry your anger and your distress, and the anger can then become mourning. That's the good thing. As long as you keep it inside or just dwell on it without sort of seeking release, I think it's just gonna grow. But what it needs to turn into is sorrow. And I think then you'll find that God is with you in that sorrow, as with all suffering. God is really, really with you. And, we can't understand often why he's allowing it. Often just the theoretical answer of, well, we live in a fallen world and, this is a consequence of sin is just not enough to carry us through. It might be intellectually sufficient, but not emotionally. But I think that's why you need a lot of one-on-ones with God. And if you have difficulty with that, I think try and find a good Catholic psychologist, who will help you try to release that, because I think that it needs to go. It needs to be expressed. It needs to get out to find healing. Mm.
That's really helpful. Also, I love the perspective you brought of not like commodifying the child and transferring the cross of infertility onto the child. Because obviously, we talk on the show all the time about how the church's teachings aren't really restrictions. But I can totally see how, for someone in that circumstance, it might feel like that in that moment. So just being able to acknowledge that it can feel that way and help direct it to here's really what the church teaches and like why the church really does desire your good.
But I do think there's a real need for people to witness who have suffered from infertility or still suffering from it, and those who've gone the IVF route and regretted it, and those that haven't even done the route. Because the problem is, so for priests to speak about it, it's good. They have that teaching obligation, but they're met with so much pain
Mhm.
that the people whom you're telling that are often not able to really accept that if you don't address the pain first. And
Mm.
so I think, they need to be aware of that needs to be they need to empathize, to open hearts, to realize, just even to speak to that briefly. I realize that you're in terrible pain about this, that you desperately want a child. And then also leave it to laity to do that, to the lay people to speak.
Be able to support each other in that and talk to someone who's gone through it themselves. How does infertility affect the marriage relationship? Because obviously men and women are different and they handle things differently. And like, how do women deal with infertility versus men? And then like, does that ever affect like the actual relationship, like make it challenging?
Yeah. I mean, I think, infertility become an incredible burden for marriage, and, some marriages break under that. It can bring about a crisis, and I think particularly because, as you were mentioning, men and women deal with it so differently and then can feel left alone. I think especially the woman can feel so left alone by the husband, just because their way of expressing things and processing things is so much different. So, I mean, first of all, one should be aware of the fact that often one person is suffering more than the other. Now, it does not need to be the woman, it can be the man. So,
Mhm.
it's not always the woman who suffer more. But so first of all, realize one is going to probably be more heartbroken than the other, and the other one needs to be aware of that and try to then help the other more, since they're perhaps in a better spot to do that. And then the other is to realize how differently the other expresses that. So for a woman looking at her husband, it seems he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't share his pain. He doesn't really want to speak about it like the woman does. And so it seems like he's not experiencing pain. And he just doesn't seem to be supporting her. But for the husband, it seems so strange that the woman, his wife, seems to be wanting to talk about it all the time and is crying about it. And what he really would like to do is to fix it. He would love to find a solution. And the problem is there's no easy fix most of the time. If you go to the doctor and he fixes it, then your infertility has been so short lived that you haven't had much time to suffer. But I think it's important for both of them to realize how can they can help the other. So for a wife to tell to her husband, I know it seems like I'm talking about this very often, but it really helps me to unburden and it helps me to cry. I know it makes you feel helpless, but to me, this is so cathartic. It's just so much pain goes out. But it may become too much for the husband, and he should also be free to say sometimes, I'm sorry, I can't just now. I cannot be there for you, and that's okay. And, for the husband, perhaps be encouraged also to talk a little bit more about his pain. Wife to say, I'd like to hear about it because you're suffering too, you're struggling too, but you're not telling me, and so it's hard for me to know what you're going through and to think that you're even that you're suffering." And, so but again, leaving him his space to do it his way. And then again, to articulate what you need. So it's so hard for me to go alone to the gynecologist because all the other women are there with their big bellies, and I'm going there because I'm infertile. And so for you to be there with me is huge, especially if there's bad news coming. You go through all these tests, and then they're like, oh, and this doesn't look good, and then you're all alone as your heart is sinking. So to have your spouse along is an amazing thing. So, ideally speaking, this can make you stronger as a couple. It really, really can. Like all suffering, you just should not give up on each other, and take that as a sort of going through fire together, and and trying to love each other more in this and through this. So, yeah, what the saddest thing for me is when they abandon it, or when one of them leaves in order to marry somebody else who might not have infertility issues in order to have kids. That seems like such a betrayal. Again, when I can understand because of the great desire for children, but it's just really devastating for the other. So, yeah.
Yeah, it also seems really important, like, to be very intentional not to place blame on if one of the parties is the one struggling with infertility and the other one isn't in those situations, just not to allow yourself to put the blame on that person for the struggles. Obviously, it's a little different if you're both have issues that are contributing, but
Mhm,
I could just see that being such a poison
mhm.
to the relationship and
Yeah,
be on guard against that if you're the one who is healthy.
yeah, yeah. That's very true. Yeah. Mhm, mhm,
And also to go off of that, it seems like it's really important for the woman to have like a couple close friends that she could turn to so she doesn't have to cry about it all the time with her husband. Being able to
absolutely.
be that kind of feminine relational um
Yes,
element in her life so that the husband doesn't have to bear the burden of all of her emotions.
exactly,
Not that it should
exactly.
be a burden, but
Yes, I absolutely agree. The grace of good friends is tremendous help. I was very blessed with that, with having some good friends on whose shoulders I could cry. So,
yeah. To go off of that, for friends and family, what are some ways that they can support a couple who is dealing with infertility, and what should they not say or do?
mhm. Okay. So, first of all, I want to speak to them and tell them, I understand how difficult your situation is. You want to help, and you feel like you're treading on eggshells because you've probably already had some reactions where you realize something you said really went the wrong way, and it was not intentional. And so now you're really scared because you don't know anymore. What can I say? What can I not say? And so I'll give a few points. The one is not to bring it up. You do not bring it up. Um, and at the most, if you're really close, you can say, if you want to talk about it, I'm always there for you. And leave it at that. But otherwise, because you don't know when is the right moment for them, they may not want to talk about it at all. They might not want to talk about it to you. So, you know, just let it be. Even if you know about some great method of curing infertility, even then, you can say, I've heard about something interesting. Let me know if you want to hear about it. Because one is bombarded with lots of good advice and you have to sift through it. And it's really hard to do that, to try to see. And people are very sure always about solutions that they have, and then they turn out not to be solutions for your particular case. So, anyway, I think Create Method and NEPRO is great as their facts, and people should be informed about that. But again, I think tread lightly. So, the other thing is, you want to help and you say you want to fix it. And there's nothing, you have to be aware, there's nothing that you will say that is going to take that pain away. Okay, just to be aware of that. There's no word that you're going to say that is going to cure them. Suddenly, that pain, they'll walk away with a light heart. It's not going to happen. So you're not the one who has to fix it. And the best you can do is to be there. You've made that clear by saying, I'm here for you, and to show compassion. And I think what we often want to do, because, it just becomes unbearable to see this pain, you want to, like, let's just end this somehow, because the different ways, well, and then people come at you and say, well, how about adoption? And as I was already mentioning earlier on, adoption is a great vocation, and it certainly gives people children that they otherwise wouldn't have had. And but not everybody has that call. And even those who have adopted children, I've talked to them, see they still have the pain of infertility. Sure, they have the happiness now of having children in their house, but I also had a friend who tried to adopt 5 times, and each time it fell through. And it was just absolutely grueling, because each time you have your hopes go up and you think, well, now we're going to have that child. And then after the fifth time, she and her husband realized, I guess we just don't have the vocation to become adoptive parents. So adoption is not sort of the solution that you can throw out there. And so to realize people may take a long time with this, they may carry this a lifetime, and what you need is patience. And patience comes from Latin pati, and means you are going to suffer with. You need to be patient, not just the couple. You need to be patient with them. So that means compassion. It means you're going to suffer with them. So you're going to stand under the cross with them and be there for them if they want it, not tender any advice if they don't ask for it, and not try to put pressure on them to finally get over it. Because that's the other thing. People think, like, oh, well, they've had it for 10 years now. Come on. I mean, shouldn't they? And then they come with examples, such and such has suffered so much because this happened to him. And look at him as the implication. And he did so well, and you're still there, weeping, and you're being selfish, and you're living in a first world country, and so many more people in this world suffer so much more. All of this doesn't help you one little bit to get over your grief. All that intellectually, hearing it doesn't help. So because I think it's very important to realize, if you allow a person to mourn, which is the space you're giving them through compassion, that is the best chance of healing. Then you're lightening the burden, but not by putting pressure on them to get over this. And yeah, it's not an easy place to be for the family and friends. I completely understand that.
Yeah.
And both sides need a lot of understanding and forgiveness for things that have been said, perhaps wrongly. So, but I think there too, it's a time to grow together if you handle it rightly.
Yeah. Are there ways that family and friends can support the couple spiritually? I guess praying for them would be the obvious one, but is there anything else that you can think of that could be good spiritual help?
I mean, they could go on pilgrimages for them. I mean, I think the couple, if they can, should go on pilgrimages. That's what we did. And if they want to, they can do that, or they can send them cards with, mass is said for you. I think that would be supportive. I mean, we're supposed to pray unceasingly, and so we can pray unceasingly for others. I wish I had known at the time already the surrender novena. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, Father Delindo. I find that so, so helpful, and I think for both family, friends, and the couple, that is so great to do, to help them accept the situation as it is for the time being, but always with the hope that God will change things, that God will lift it.
In the case of things like having masses offered for them, is it helpful to tell the couple that you are having masses offered for them for this cause, or is that an instance of bringing it up that could kind of open a wound? And is it better to just kind of offer the prayers in silence, and then if an opportunity presents itself and it seems like a good time to mention it, let them know?
First of all, I think it depends on your relationship with them, and it depends what is written on the card. If it's just "Mass is said for you," and you don't put in there "for your infertility issues," I think that it's okay. I would think so. Um, but what I didn't mention yet is the whole question of inviting couples to baptisms and baby showers and all of that, and the difficulty of announcing the birth of another child or expecting another child. And that's, because surely there are other people in the family who have the opposite problem and and are having a lot of children, and so they're in a very uncomfortable situation too. So, again, the thing is no pressure. So you can, if you're close, then absolutely invite them because it'd be strange not to. But say, completely understand if you don't want to come, then you can freely decide whether you want to do it or not. And as a couple, if you can, just to say, "I'm so sorry. I'm so happy for you. I really, really am. I wish I could be there on that day with you, but I'm afraid this is just too painful. I'm afraid I would ruin your day."
Mhm.
And and then discern yourself. Can I do it or can I not? Sometimes you feel like, no, this is just too much. I can't. And sometimes you're like, well, I think I can. I might cry a bit, but it'll be okay. And so in terms of announcing pregnancies, the sort of one-on-one, face to face is completely overrated. Don't do that. Write an email, send a text, something like that, so that the couple has the time to sort of deal with the information, because what this is, it provokes some mourning in them. This is not a sign of envy. It's just their own suffering that kind of comes up again, and that gives them the space to do so. And then they can collect themselves, and eventually they will write and tell you that they're happy for you. But otherwise, they have to do it in front of you, and that's much harder. And they have to grapple with their grief. And that's another thing I would say to couples suffering from infertility. So I was told, if my grief showed that I was being envious, that was a sign of envy. And I was like, oh my gosh, this just sounds terrible. How can I be envious? And the thing is, well, first of all, it need not be envy at all. It's just your own pain surfacing.
Mhm.
And if it's envy, then it again means you haven't mourned enough. It means you need to spend more time giving yourself the space to be sad about the fact that you do not have those children that you so desperately want.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Oh, that's really helpful. And I was going to ask about if there's any like boundaries that couples will put up to kind of protect themselves emotionally, like not going to baptisms or something like that.
mhm,
So, is there anything else like that that friends and family can expect that they shouldn't take personally if a couple
mhm.
declines to, I don't know, I guess baptisms was the main one I was thinking of, but is there anything else that friends and family should be aware of?
Well, I know some families have told me that the couple wouldn't can't even come to Christmas
Mhm.
celebrations, because they're suffering so much, but that family was very, very understanding. It
Okay.
was just, it's just too hard. So, I think you just have to be flexible and see what the particular couple where they're at and what they need. And the best way of helping them be able to do it again is not to put pressure on them. It's kind of the obvious thing to say. It's so tempting because, of course, you want the whole family together, and you, as the parents, you want them all there, and suddenly there's some of your children are not showing up because it's too painful for them to be with their siblings who have these other kids. So, it's tough. There's no way around it.
I'm guessing that they probably shouldn't be surprised if the couple doesn't necessarily want to share everything with them as well. If the couple doesn't want
Mhm.
to talk about what their condition are or just really talk about
Exactly.
it, don't take that necessarily personally.
Exactly, exactly, and you shouldn't ask. You shouldn't ask, "So what's the reason? Is it you? Is it your husband?" Because
Right.
there's especially with people who are not necessarily very close, you get the sense
Mhm.
of curiosity. You're just becoming this object of curiosity is like, "What is it?" And the thing is, I did not want to share with people what was going on, and I was really upset if my parents started sharing with others what was going on, because it's like they have no right to know. They have no right to know. It's very, painful. And there are some cultures where, if the man struggles with infertility, that for him is such a dent to his reputation. I mean, I know in the sort of Southern cultures, Mediterranean, it's really, really hard. And so there too, I feel like, especially if that's your cultural context, you want to protect yourselves so that people aren't going to sort of point fingers and said, look at him or look at her. What I was more challenged with is that the assumption always was it's the woman, it's just the woman. And I thought, well, no, actually, if you look at it, one third of the cases the woman, one third of the cases it's the man, and the other third it's a combination of both and inexplainable.
Yeah.
Those are the stats. Mm.
I actually, along those lines, had a question of just kind of navigating when you have family members or friends who aren't Catholic. So, obviously, we live in a world where a lot of couples don't welcome children for selfish reasons. Either they're using contraception or they're just not having children for what could be selfish reasons. And as pro life Catholics, we want to encourage people to be open for life. How can you navigate that, especially among people who aren't Catholic, who there's a much higher probability that if they're not having children, it could be because they're using birth control?
Okay.
How
Mhm.
can we as Catholics encourage couples to be open for life without hurting couples who may not have children because of infertility? Is it better
Mhm.
to kind of address people in general to encourage them to be open for life and not encourage specific couples? Just because I know people that have run into that where they have a family
Mhm.
member who isn't Catholic, who isn't having children, and it's like, oh, I want to encourage my like niece or nephew to have more kids, and then you
Mhm.
find out after the fact that they've had multiple miscarriages, and it's
Mhm.
like, oh shoot, I stepped in stepped in it. Like how can we navigate that?
Yeah, that's really, really hard. I mean, I'd say most of the time it's not our place to be talking directly to somebody and calling them out because we probably don't know the situation. We don't know the what's going on. I think at the most if you're very close, you can sort of ask, what's going on, but I'd be very, very careful with that, very wary. We once had a priest asking us, "So when are you two going to decide to have kids?"
Mm,
And we were like, this was the second year of our marriage. And I was like, well, we're completely open. We just don't, it's just not happening. And, um, and then I think the more general approach is the one to take. Of course, priests and church should talk about it. In your pro-life ministry, one should talk about the beauty of things. But I don't think that's sort of speaking specifically to a couple. If they haven't come themselves to ask you about it, I would be very, very careful about that.
yeah.
Unfortunately, because it would be nice, you'd like to share, you like to say, "Oh, this is so wonderful," especially if their choice is really one of just a contraceptive attitude, and they think their life will be ruined if they have kids, and you'd so much like to sort of debunk, their false notions, but if you happen to be married and have kids and be a Catholic, then you're already a great witness to them, to see what it's like to have kids, so.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. It's just, yeah, it's so hard to like, how do you counter the contraceptive mentality while also not inadvertently hurting couples who are perfectly open to life and you just have no
Mhm,
clue?
mhm, mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's
To
very true.
close out today, what advice would you offer to a couple who is struggling with infertility who could be listening to this? And is there anything particular you would say to the woman or to the man that could be like differ?
Mhm. Good question. Um, I'd say, first of all, that if you're in the thick of things and it feels like this is just pain and you don't see anything positive coming out of this at this point because you're just not there. Um, just to, I would like to encourage them and tell them you have no idea how fruitful you are. You have absolutely no idea how spiritually fruitful you are. It is tremendous what you are doing. And, it's not that doesn't mean it takes away the pain, and I always felt, well, people were telling me, "Well, you've got spiritual children." I felt like that was supposed, again, to make me not feel the pain, like, this sort of makes up for it. It doesn't. No, you want those children, and having spiritual children is not enough for you, if that's what you want, but I think it can still be consoling to realize that what feels so useless is not done in vain, and that God is doing something tremendous, and that I think you have a particular vocation in this current culture of a civilization of death, where children are so easily aborted, thrown away, mistreated, abused. And you're not doing that, and you're not going the route of IVF. That is a tremendous sacrifice and a tremendous witness if you're able to share that with others. But even if not, it's spiritually tremendously fruitful. And I tried to tell to the man that he is being such a good husband and so manly by standing with his wife and bearing the fact that he can't do anything, but that by being there for her, he is being the best possible husband. There's nothing better that he can do. And for the woman, I would encourage her to realize that her husband is perhaps really grieving very strongly and not able to share, and to be there for him if he does want to open up without forcing it. Because I think there's a lot of pain there too, and men have a harder time expressing it. So,
No, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today, Dr. Marie. It's just been so great to have your perspective on this and to talk through it, because I think everybody knows at least one or two couples who have struggled with infertility, either like like primary infertility or secondary infertility. And so it's so good to have these tools and to just kind of talk about it and be aware.
thank you so much. You've been an amazing host. You ask wonderful questions. You're a great listener. This was very, very pleasant.
Thank you. And then could you just tell our audience where people can find your book?
Sure. So it's called When Expecting Doesn't Happen, Turning Infertility into a Journey of Hope. It was published by Emmaus, so you can get it directly from Emmaus and otherwise, over Amazon and the usual places.
Perfect. And I'll link in the description so people can find it there. So,
Great.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
And to all of our audience, please like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode, please just spread the word about it, share it on social media so people can watch it if it's something that could really touch them. And maybe don't send it to a couple that's struggling with infertility, because we talked about not bringing it up, but put it on social media so they can find it if they need it. And as always, keep on living the culture of life. God bless.